A packed television studio in the heart of Ouagadougou, lights blazing from every direction, the hum of cameras, the soft rumble of an expectant crowd. At the center of it all sits a simple wooden desk, nothing special, nothing grand, just a small table that tonight will become the stage of a moment that will echo across continents. On one side sits the journalist, well-dressed, confident, his tie perfectly aligned, his papers stacked like weapons disguised as notes. There is a small smirk on his lips, the kind of smirk that comes from someone who believes he controls the room, the moment, and perhaps even the destiny of the man sitting across from him. Opposite him sits Captain Ibrahim Traore, military uniform pressed and sharp, boots polished, shoulders straight, his posture calm, almost serene, no fidgeting, no nervous glances, his hands gently folded in front of him, his eyes steady, unwavering, unreadable. Anyone watching can feel it instantly. This is a man who has walked through storms much bigger than a television studio. The audience senses it too, a feeling in the air, thick and electric, like the atmosphere just before a thunderstorm hits. Something is about to happen, something unscripted, something dangerous. The journalist has prepared something big, something he believes will destroy the man sitting in front of him. Something he thinks will expose him, embarrass him, crush him in front of millions watching across Africa and beyond. The camera slowly zooms in on Ibrahim's face. He knows the ambush is coming. You can see it in the tiny flicker of his eyelids, in the way his breath settles deeper into his chest, steady and controlled. But does he flinch? Not even for a heartbeat. The interview begins as expected. Questions about security. Questions about development, questions about terrorism, standard topics, delivered with a journalist's polished rhythm. Ibrahim answers each calmly, honestly, without political jargon, without rehearsed lines. He speaks like someone who has lived the consequences of every word he says. A soldier who has carried wounded men on his shoulders, a man who has walked through villages broken by violence, someone who refuses to look away from the suffering of his own people. But then, it happens. 20 minutes in, a shift small, almost invisible at first, but instantly felt. The journalist leans forward. That smirk grows just a little wider. He shuffles through his papers with theatrical precision. The room tightens. Even the camera operators straighten their backs. The producers watching from behind the glass lean closer to their screens. The air changes. Everyone senses the trap about to snap shut. Captain Traore, the journalist begins, tone syrupy with false politeness. I have a question that many people are asking. A question the world wants answered. The audience holds its breath. Ibrahim simply nods. No fear. No irritation, just curiosity. You claim to be a man of the people, the journalist continues, his voice rising slightly as he pivots to perform for the audience. You claim to fight for justice, for sovereignty, for the ordinary citizens of Burkina Faso. But tell me, how can anyone trust you when you took power through force? A hush falls over the room. The journalist is not finished. How can you speak of justice when you broke the laws you now want people to obey? How do you call yourself a leader when you rose to power by overthrowing a government? The room erupts in gasps. A few people murmur, shifting anxiously in their seats. The journalist leans back, confident he has finally cornered his guest. This is it, the moment his sponsors and silent allies had been waiting for. The perfect trap. He expects Ibrahim to stutter, to sweat, to explode in anger, or to crumble beneath the weight of the accusation. Instead, Ibrahim smiles. Not a mocking smile, not a political smile, a soft, genuine, peaceful smile that lights his entire face. A smile that confuses the journalist immediately. Thank you for asking that, Ibrahim says in a calm, almost warm tone. The journalist's eyebrows jump. That is not the reaction he rehearsed for. The audience murmurs. The control room freezes. Something unexpected is unfolding. Trust is not something leaders demand, Ibrahim continues. It is something they earn. He leans forward slightly, not aggressively, but respectfully, as if having a conversation with a friend. But before you ask why the people should trust me, I want to ask you and everyone watching, where was trust when our children were dying? Where was trust when foreign companies drained our wealth while our own people starved? A ripple moves across the audience. Heads nod slowly, eyes widen. When mothers had to choose which child to feed because there wasn't enough food for both, he continues, "Who talked about broken laws then?" For the first time tonight, the journalist loses his composure. His fingers grip his papers a little tighter. He tries to interrupt, but Ibrahim raises a hand, calmly, respectfully. "Please," he says softly, "let me finish." His voice shifts, still gentle, but carrying a weight that presses into every heart in the room. I respect laws. I do. But there is a law higher than any written by men sitting comfortably in air-conditioned offices. A law that says no child should sleep hungry while gold leaves our land. A law that says no mother should bury her son because leaders failed to protect their own people. Silence. Deep, heavy silence. Even those who came skeptical begin to feel something shift. The journalist tries to recover. He flips through his papers rapidly, trying to regain control. "Captain," he says sharply, "you talk beautifully. But let's discuss your actions. You froze bank accounts. You expelled diplomats. You made enemies of powerful nations. Some call you reckless, even dangerous. Some say you are isolating Burkina Faso and pushing the country toward economic collapse." A few audience members nod anxiously. The tension spikes again. Ibrahim remains still. "You call it isolation," he replies. "I call it independence." The room reacts instantly. A wave of warmth spreads. "You call it reckless," he continues, "but I call it courage. Because what is truly reckless is allowing your people to be exploited in their own homeland. What is dangerous is letting powerful outsiders dictate your destiny." He pauses, his gaze softening as memories flicker behind his eyes. "I have walked through villages where children have swollen bellies from hunger, while trucks filled with our gold drive past them on their way to foreign ships. I have held mothers who lost their sons in terrorist attacks that could have been prevented if leaders before me had invested in the military instead of their overseas mansions." A young man in the audience wipes his eyes. An old woman clutches her dress. Even those previously skeptical lean forward, listening deeply. The journalist takes his chance. "And what about your alliances?" he fires back. "Russia, for example. You have partnered with nations accused of human rights violations. How do you justify working with them?" This is the kill shot. The question meant to label him a hypocrite. The camera zooms so close, you can see the shine of sweat on the journalist's forehead. Millions watch in suspense. Social media feeds are waiting. Political analysts poised. Supporters and critics glued to screens. Ibrahim closes his eyes for a brief second, gathering strength from a quiet place inside him. When he opens them, his gaze is sharper, clearer, deeper. "When your house is on fire," he says quietly, "you do not ask the person handing you water what religion they follow or what their political history is. You take the water and you save your home." The audience erupts in applause, but quickly quiets again as he continues. "Our house has been on fire for decades, and those who now question our alliances, where were they when we burned? Where were their perfect human rights records when terrorists killed our people? When children were being kidnapped as soldiers?" The journalist's face drains of color. "I will work with anyone," Ibrahim declares. "Anyone who helps me protect my people and restore dignity to my nation, and I will never apologize for that." And then something happens that nobody expects. Ibrahim stands. Security tenses instantly. The journalist leans back in panic. The entire audience seems to stop breathing. But Ibrahim does not approach the journalist. He walks past him, past the cameras, past the lights. He walks straight into the audience. Cameramen scramble to follow. The footage becomes raw, handheld, unpolished, real. He stops beside the elderly woman who had been crying earlier. He kneels. A leader in full military uniform kneeling before an ordinary citizen. "Mama," he says softly, taking her hand. "Why are you crying?" Her voice breaks as she speaks. "My son, Musa, he was killed by terrorists. He was only 19. Ibrahim's jaw tightens. His eyes glisten. "What was his name?" "Musa," she whispers. He repeats it gently, "Musa." And then he says something that will be etched into history. "I promise you, Mama, everything I do with Musa in my heart. Burkina Faso will never forget him." She breaks down. The room breaks down. The nation watching from screens breaks down. Ibrahim kisses her forehead respectfully before standing again. He turns to face the cameras. "You ask who I am?" he says. "I am not a politician. I am a son of this land. My mother sold vegetables. My father was a farmer. I know hunger. I know struggle. I know what it means to feel invisible in your own country." He spreads his arms, standing among the people. "That is why I took responsibility. Not for power, but because I could no longer close my eyes to the suffering around me. And if that makes me a criminal in some people's eyes, then so be it." The room explodes into a standing ovation. People crying, shouting, clapping, embracing strangers. The journalist sits frozen, his trap turned into dust. Later, the interview spreads across Africa like wildfire. TikTok clips reach millions. Hashtags trend. Villagers gather around phones to watch. Skeptics reconsider. Mothers cry. Young people feel hope they thought was impossible. And across the world, people witness something rare. A leader choosing honesty, compassion, courage, humanity. Not because it was politically smart, but because it was true. And that is why this moment becomes legendary. Not because Ibrahim Traore won a debate, but because he reminded people that leadership is not about power. It is about heart,